So great. Thank you so much for meeting with me this evening. Good evening,
Sure.
Mark McKenna. So, working in the industry for over 30 years with over 600 credited comic book titles to your name, do you have a favorite project that you've been involved with and why?
I I'll tell you, yeah, it's 600 credits that I actually counted, but there's a database that actually has me down for over 1,000. But I have a feeling a lot of that has to do with reprinting my artwork in trade paperbacks, and when these movies come out, they reissue this stuff another format. So there are a few things that were dear to me. The one that comes to my mind is this Parallax, this Green Lantern one shot I did for DC that basically killed Hal Jordan, which is the second Green Lantern after Alan Scott was the Golden Age Green Lantern, and he got taken out killing the Sun Eater, or destroying the Sun Eater, which is basically going to devour our solar system, and that was a big deal book for me at the time. And then I also at DC did this Young Justice kind of introduction, which I think was a kids Cartoon Network show. It was called The Justice League World Without Grown-Ups, and it was 100 pages of two parts, 48 pages each, and they collected it later into a 100-page special, and that basically introduced the Young Justice to to the DC universe, which was kind of cool. So those are good projects for me.
Excellent. Very cool. Obviously, you've just mentioned DC and a couple of projects that you've done with them, but you've worked with an awful lot of different, the big names in the industry. You've worked with Marvel, you've worked with DCs, and a lot of independents as well. For you, if you had to choose a favorite between Marvel and DC, which would you choose and why?
So, I grew up a Marvel kid. I didn't really, to me, the DC, the Superman books and all that stuff kind of felt boring to me growing up. And when you saw Spider-Man and Daredevil, and that's just stuff was so lively to me. So my heart always lied with Marvel. In fact, when I started at Marvel, Marvel wouldn't hire. I was working on production at Marvel for a year and a half, but they wouldn't hire me to do a regular book because they always saw me as a corrections guy. It wasn't until I brought my art samples to DC that DC actually hired me first. Gave me a contract back in 1987, and I stayed under contract for 4 years doing Dr. Fate, Doom Patrol, Legion of Superheroes, things like that. And I'll tell you this, though, DC always treated their freelancers better than Marvel. We always got Christmas presents in the mail and holiday cards, whereas Marvel, you were lucky to get a couple copies of your book in the mail, So, but number one doesn't have to try as hard, right? So I guess that might have been part of it at the time.
Definitely. That's really interesting to hear about and to kind of find out more about like the inner workings behind those big names and what they do. For you now, do you work with a lot of those kind of companies, or do you tend to stick to the things that you're doing now, your projects?
Yeah, so Marvel and DC haven't really called or rang my bell in a while now, but part of that has to do with page rates. When I was in the prime, Marvel and DC were making big money on books because everything was selling, hundreds of thousands of copies, and like the speculators in the market were buying, the readership was maybe 500,000, but the books were selling millions of copies. So you knew the speculators were buying up these books with these metallic covers, glow-in-the-dark covers, and they were reselling them at higher rates, and that kind of affected the readership because got caught up in being a collectible versus a reader thing. And I even signed 4,000 autographs for the QVC, which was the home shopping. I signed 4,000 Spider-Man books for them 1 year back in '92, and it was selling them for 31 or 31.95 with my autograph, which is sad because I would have signed it for anybody on the street, but you can't say no to them. They're paying $2 an autograph for 4,000 books. So we kind of bought into it at the time. Yeah, but it wasn't. So yeah, so I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, as you say, there's been a lot of like changes in kind of the comic book industry. Obviously, there were a lot more people that buy comic books in the physical copies back in the day. Now it is a lot more the collectible kind of side of things, and that kind of moves us into the next question that I have, because your sci-fi horror series that you do, Combat Jack, sorry, you've got some of the stuff behind you and around you there for it, I can see, but that's being immortalized now by Terra Virtua as a limited set of NFTs. So very much a collectible, very much something that, you know, people can own and take and have this virtual property for themselves. I was just kind of interested in seeing, one, how that kind of came about, and then two, do you have plans to do that with any of your other projects?
So yeah, so what allowed me to do Combat Jacks really was that has to do with my mainstream comic career. You know, the Marvel and DC stuff allowed me to do this book because I crowdfunded it through Kickstarter, and I raised somewhere around $8,000 or $9,000 to do the book as a hardcover. And without my history, I think that would have changed. It would have been more difficult to do it because it would have been out of pocket money. So that was the thing for me. The only other thing I have in the works is I already have another Combat Jacks book in the works. Originally, I did it for a Canadian, I want to say it was IDW Comics, where the head cheese up there was saying, listen, if you do this as a 4-issue miniseries, I'll collect it and put it out as a IDW trade paperback. But I had only intended on doing it as a 32-page one-shot at the time. And so when he told me he would do that, I processed, what if I continued with this? And I did it as, now it's a 140-page NFT. But the other thing I have in the works that I might consider doing something like this is really a children's book that I do. It's called Banana Tail, and this is the cover to a new book that I did also through crowdfunding. And I just don't know if the market, you know, children's book market would be a good idea for an NFT, a good fit for NFTs. But I do have more Combat Jacks in the works. As the book ends, there's an idea that I would do, you know, a shard of this planet that blows up, comes across the universe and ends up in the Himalayas, and we start all over again.
Awesome. Very cool. And with that comic collection, so obviously it's turned into the NFT, it seems to be doing pretty well. It dropped on the 26th of October. And when I looked a couple of days ago, there were only about 40 of some of the like original assets left. Now I'm sure it's even fewer. So it's been selling very, very quickly. Did you expect it to do that well?
You know, I don't know if that was well, to be honest with you, because it's the first time I've done something like this. And you know, I've done NFT work, but it wasn't a book. It was always single pieces that were either animated or, you know, handled as a very limited edition. But you know, it's when you have 100 pieces and it's being offered throughout the world. To me, it seems like it could move faster, but I don't know. I didn't know what to expect. So part of me is like, yay. There's 60, and the book is the director's cut is more special because I had to go through getting all the pencil art together, all the black and white ink art with lettered pages, unlettered pages. So when you open it up on your V-reader, you get to go in and out of different pages. You know, you could have page 5 in black and white pencil, black and white ink, full color, unlettered, and lettered. So it gave the people who bought that sort of an inside edge, because when I did the book, I never intended on that. And there also is that $30, you know, limited edition. I don't know how limited it is. I think it's probably 1,000 copies.
Definitely. And it's really interesting. I've had a look at some of those different assets and the way that you can kind of access it on the director's cut. Obviously, being able to see kind of like layer by layer and peel it back. It is an entirely different way to to consume that kind of content and see those things. So it is really, really interesting. For us at Comicspiration, we're basically about inspiring people, creatives and different people in the things that they're passionate about, the things that they love, which, you know, intertwines a lot with comic books, the things that spin away from those, whether it be film, TV, games, and everything else like that. So we're also creating new and original stories. Is there any advice you'd give to newcomers to this industry?
Uh, you know, so yeah, that is a tricky question because, you know, your parents always tell you you're great at everything, and unfortunately, they're not the ones that hire you. You know, but you have to. It's hard. You got to be objective, and it's there is a fear of failure in the business because it's very personal. And if somebody, you know, who potentially is an editor who can hire you and give you a shot, doesn't like your work, you know, it can set you back. But you have to have intestinal fortitude in this business because it is personal, you know. It's not like you're. I mean, listen, there's pride in stocking shelves in a supermarket too, right? But it's, you know, how many people get a chance to do this in an industry? Like, how many people can you say? How many artists have actually drawn Spider-Man in published artwork? It's certainly, you know, hundreds, but maybe not thousands. I don't even know. But so the advice I would say is, don't look at the low-rung talent, you know, when you're trying to get into a business like this. What you need to do is you have to reach for the stars. You have to go out and try to be the best. Like, if you see that, why is this guy working? I can do better than that. That's not the way to approach it. You need to go to the hierarchy in the business and try to, you know, be as good as those guys. And that's going to be where, you know, you're going to start to see positivity.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And then with the kind of artistic side, with when you actually do get to work on those projects, when you're approaching a story, or when you're creating, you know, characters, worlds, a story in general, what is it that inspires you, or what is it that kind of keeps you motivated in making those projects and doing those things?
So with Combat Jacks, that was just happened to be a spur of the moment process. My son and I were watching. It was around Halloween time. It was this time back in 2011, I want to say, and I said to my son, you know, there's just not a lot of good jack-o'-lantern monsters out there, and we started to throw some ideas around, and the concept of this alien race that's indigenous to a planet that we're exploring for future, you know, the future of Earth's overpopulation. It was a thing that just kind of rang out to us, and now it's started as a little anthill, and it's gotten some legs. You know, I printed 1,000 copies. I've sold a couple thousand copies through comic shops because, you know, I'm, you know, Diamond Distribution, who was handling all the comics, really a monopoly for all the comics in the world, you know, in the country, and certainly overseas. They took it and helped me with they promoted it. They made a trick or treat pick of the month back in 2012. So the process for me is really, something's got to just click. I always consider myself an artist first and a writer third, probably. My marketing is probably better than my writing skills, and I'm not afraid to bring somebody in who can help me tighten things up, and, you know, because sometimes you're too close to it, right? And you need somebody outside to see what it is you're doing and give you thoughts and advice and scripting, and that's where my creative team came in on Combat Jacks. Sam Eagleston, who took my kind of shoddy plots and made them into a tighter script, and Jason Baruti, who did all my layouts and my pencil breakdowns. He was, you know, these guys, without them, I don't fly. You know, I mean, I work for Marvel and DC, and that gets me only so far. But without the talent behind me, it could fall flat.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. On my end, that's the kind of questions that I've gotten put down. But for you, is there anything else that you'd like to share? Any other advice or anything else you want to say?
So we talked about, the NFTs and the combat jacks. The NFT market for me is still new. This is a year, November, that I did my first drop with Maker's Place. So I'm older now, right? So I'm going to be collecting Social Security soon. So the part of me is, I always thought I was kind of on the retired side, but this whole NFT market has brought me a renaissance, and you can't help but be excited by it. But I'm also leery of it too, because you just don't know where it's going. There's no roadmap to it, right? So you do what you do, and I'm not all in my mind, because I keep myself distanced just a little bit, because I don't know, I'm kind of leaning towards, not, just doing art for fun and not for profit anymore, so that plays a role too for me too. And now you got me thinking, Ben, that I probably should do some more, stories outside of the combat jacks and banana tail realm. So I might have to come up with something new.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it'll be exciting to find out more about as well. Um, Thank you so much for taking time out and speaking with me today. It's been a
Yeah.
real privilege for me to be able to speak to someone who, has had so much experience and just really put in the work over more than 30 years, because it is something that I kind of, aspire to do many of the things that you're doing now and have done and kind of go forward and do. So it's just been fantastic to speak to you, and yeah, just thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm glad if I can help some, I am a big I teach art to 12 and 13-year-old kids every week, and some of the parents reach out to me and say, my kid got in sports and he doesn't like sports and he's done this, but your class, and of course they promote me as a Marvel and DC artist. Which, going back a little bit, so yeah, I worked for DC. I was under contract. I worked for Marvel, not under contract, and then I did the Star Wars books for when Dark Horse had the rights, and that opened up a whole other realm for me, because in the beginning, Star Wars, and I was a licensed Star Wars artist, so Maker's Place said, we want you to do Star Wars, and I did until it got it was a smaller market back then, and now everyone's aware of what's going on, and I think there's a lot more hands in the pie now. So you got to be careful about what you handle. So I'm doing a lot more. A lot more of my stuff is public domain stuff, and certainly if I could, promote and sell more combat jacks and do more moving forward, that would be where my heart would lie.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you so much.